right, so since we're discussing like our favorite movies of 2012, why don't you tell me what made your top three?
My top three this year was, in first place I had Les Miserables, which I thought was terrific.
I agree, totally fantastic.
In second place I had Wreck-It Ralph, which is an animated movie, a Disney animated movie. A lot of people thought it was Pixar because it was computer graphics, but it was actually Disney Animation Studios. And then my third favorite movie of the year was The Avengers.
So let's start with Les Miserables. So what about the movie just like struck you and made it your #1 choice of the year?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the musical. I've seen it on Broadway. I've owned the soundtrack probably since I was 10 years old. I've always really, really liked the story and the characters. And I think the music's terrific. I thought it was brilliantly done because Tom Hooper, who a lot of people know won the Oscar a couple years ago as the director of The King's Speech, he did a very brave thing by having actors, many of whom were not trained singers or performers, sing live to camera. So they would have a piano playing in the background and the actors would sing live as they were being recorded. Now most musicals don't do this. They have a pre-recorded soundtrack that everybody lip syncs to as they do their scenes, and that'll be recorded months ahead of time. So the actors are kind of forced into the choices they make in the recording studio months and months before they ever see the cameras. And I think it kills the emotion a little bit because if you're a fan of live musical theater, which I am, you're used to seeing people kind of project their emotions out into the audience to kind of connect with the music, you know, in that moment. And I think by Tom Hooper having his performers sing live, I think that was really, really good. I think there was a lot of emotion in the movie that wouldn't have existed if the vocals were a little bit cleaner and tighter. I think a lot of the performances would have been a little bit more flat. So I think that was the best possible choice he could have made. And sure, a lot of the vocals weren't perfect. Russell Crowe's vocals get criticized a lot. They didn't detract from the movie for me. There were times when the singers would be a little bit flat or a little bit sharp because, again, it wasn't perfect, but I thought that gave things a little bit more character and personality, and I thought the emotions were absolutely raw and very powerful when you watched it.
Completely agree with that assessment. I know like half of our family went and saw it after Christmas, and they were very divided, specifically with Russell Crowe's character and his vocals. And I disagreed with them. I felt that although they weren't perfect, that they didn't detract from the emotion and the feeling and the presence of the film as a whole. And, you know, I still absolutely loved it. You know, like Anne Hathaway's performance of I Dreamed a Dream, as soon as that started, like the tears, like, I mean, it's so emotional. And Eddie Redmayne's, or is that how you say his name?
Redmayne, I think, yeah.
Redmayne, yeah. Empty tables, empty chairs, like.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff was heartbreaking to watch. I mean, you and I saw it together, and you handed me tissues about a third of the way through the movie, and I probably used them 5 or 6 times. And not just the fact that the big name actors in the show did a great performance. You mentioned to me that there was somebody you really liked named Aaron, I think his name's Tveit.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I know he's done some musical theater in the past, along with Samantha Barks, who played Eponine.
Right.
And having more seasoned, I guess, theater performers mixed in with the cast, I think rounded the vocals out a little bit and gave it a little bit more strength. And I thought they were amazing. I thought Samantha Barks' Eponine, which is a lot of times a really thankless role to play in this, because her character is so tragic and sad. I thought she was brilliant. I really, really liked her. I hope I see her in a lot of movies coming forth. She's a beautiful performer, really, really emotional, and I liked her performances maybe some of the most in the entire movie.
Well, and I felt that way about Aaron's character. I cannot say his French name.
Enjolras, yeah.
Anyways, and I felt because his vocals were so strong, and he's the leader of this band of rebels, and they're fighting for their freedom, and you know, like. No, what is the song?
You believe the red and black.
Red and black.
You believe he's capable of inspiring these people.
Exactly. And there's that voice that was so commanding and beautiful. Fantastic performance from all the characters.
Yeah, a leader's charisma you really get from him as he performs. And another thing I liked is you realize how epic this story is compared to something that came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago, which was they did a Phantom of the Opera, which I thought was a very nice version of Phantom of the Opera. You realized how self-contained that story is. How it's just a few characters, basically in one opera house in Paris, and it's a very small, self-contained story where you realize how epic and broad and big Les Miserables is, how it spans years, decades in the lives of some of these people, and you see just the rises and falls of each of these characters and how much they change from the beginning to the end. It really, seeing it on the screen like that, where they had you know, the room to play with all these gigantic set pieces and the beautiful design and, you know, the amazing camera work. It just reminded me how epic this story is, as opposed to what a lot of musical theater is, where it's very small and self-contained because they have to do it in these small theaters. And I think it was absolutely as good an experience as you can have at a movie theater at any time last year, was Les Mis.
Well, and I know I talked to a number of people who were familiar with the music and might have seen the stage show, but now seeing it in the theater, they finally got and understood the cadence and the structure of the story in a way that they had never understood it before. And because film has the ability to create that depth and the authenticity of history that even a stage performance cannot do, I thought that was a brilliant combining of those two things to create a masterful story. And I know for me, the character of Jean Valjean, which was portrayed by Hugh Jackman, is just like the most brilliant character of redemption, and he spends after he releases from prison and the priest forgives him for stealing from him and basically gives him his freedom in the gift of the silver candlesticks and other, you know, kitchen stuff, that he changes the rest of his life is to doing good and to helping people and to redeeming himself and trying to redeem those around him. And even the scene when he's fighting with those young men and the rebellion, that he sort of stands back away from them, and you can see the heartbreak in his face that the kids or the boys don't understand the preciousness of their lives that they're about to lose. And I loved, you know, his character, and he's just brilliant in that movie, and well-deserved Oscar nomination, and we'll see if he wins in a few weeks.
Well, and I think the last thing that I'd want to say about it is, a lot of people think it's a very sad story, and there are parts of it that are incredibly sad. There's heartbreaking parts to it, but I believe you lose a little bit of the point of the story if you only see the sadness. I think there's a lot of redemption for many of the characters. There's a lot of triumph. There's a lot of things that are really uplifting about the story, how people change, how their lives are better, how people understand who they really are as they go through trials and suffering. And, you know, they realize what nobility is, what strength is, what happiness really means. And even in the middle of all that, you see two characters fall in love, which is kind of the purest thing that could happen amongst the chaos of everything else that's going on in the story. And I think it's really short-sighted if you view it as something that's just a tragedy.
Right.
And again, I say it was the best experience I had at the theater all year.
I agree. One of my favorite movies.